Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. I've before you turn on your cameras, which would be nice. Then we see also the yeah, great.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
A lot of good friends and familiar faces there. Yeah. Hello, Joe. Hello there. Just scrolling through the pages.
Good morning.
Morning. And several new faces. That's good because it's
Good morning.
some good morning for some.
Bom dia from Portugal.
Yeah.
Hi from Ireland.
Hello there, Patricia. So I guess with more than 70 people present, we can make a start, and I guess more people will join in the course of this afternoon session. Welcome to the closing final convention of our European Mooc Consortium for the Labour Market action line. And as you will have seen in the agenda, we will close this with a policy forum, as we have developed several policy recommendations that we would like to go through with you and get reflections from addressed stakeholders on that later on. But first we have some input from the EMC-LM consortium itself and the reflection on their work in the past years of this initiative. And I would like to have a kick-off introduction presentation there. I have to select the right screen, this one. A moment. Oh, and then I'll go to the first slide. Okay, I hope you can see this. And let me just give you a short introduction for the purpose of this meeting and the framework under which we developed this convention and policy for. So for those who have not been a part of our sessions before, you must know that the whole initiative was initiated by the European Mooc Consortium. So the backbone of this initiative is the European Mooc Consortium, consisting of, at that time, of FutureLearn, Fun in France, OpenObed, EduOpen, and Myriad X, main platforms from the different countries in Europe. And I can already indicate that we are extending this. But at that point, we have already more than 3,000 MOOCs and representing 400 higher education institutions by these platforms. Oppie, can you close the microphone, please? I can hear the sounds there. So already here you see that these are the MOOC platforms represented. We have now added iMOOCs from Austria, and we have a new member of Portugal, the platform for now. With the MOOC consortium, in which we addressed the expertise and the developments of MOOCs in Europe and collaboration of reaching out to the labor market with our MOOCs. Pete, your microphone is still open. And we extended the partnership with employment agencies and companies and universities to reach out to the labor market with labor market stakeholders together. In all here, in short, you have the main objectives of the initiative is ensure that we want to strengthen the partners in the Knowledge Alliance, because there's a Knowledge Alliance in sharing expertise and experiences in MOOCs and digital education. Create a framework for structural collaboration on the delivery of MOOCs and meeting the EU labor market. Provide more complete, high-quality MOOCs and digital education. Have a structured approach to continuing education. Enhance the quality of the European workforce as an overall statement there. All this in contributing to society's requirement of learning for our lifespan, with the purpose of improving our knowledge, skills, and competencies within personal, civic, social, and employment-related perspectives. So this is the overall framework in which we are operating. And to support this continuing education, we need more flexible, shorter programs. MOOCs and short learning programs that we have explored as well comply with this by being online and short, being fit for the labor market and those learners who are already in a working position and need to upskill and reskill and specialize by shorter programs. So we need more flexible offerings, but on the other hand, the current systems offer two main options. One is accredited part-time, full-time programs, or non-accredited modules or courses. And yeah, it is of course important to give full attention to continuing professional development by developing also a fit qualification and making that part of a fully fledged area of higher education and funded as a public good. So we really are uplifting continuing education by fit qualifications and making them part of the educational system. This is in line with the vision of a future university, not only providing the degree education of a campus-based degree education, but also focusing on open education and continuing education and professional development. So in that sense, adding the online flexible offerings for continuing education as a new area. An EMC-LM, we created this first of all.
And even if I was saying, what would I concentrate over the next?
Dialogue defining the role of MOOC platforms, the universities, employment services and companies, all labor market stakeholders together in a structure of dialogue, and empower them in collaboration to, well, explore needs from the market, co-develop, co-deliver MOOCs for continuing education. Already at the start of the project for EMC-LM, with the European MOOC Consortium, we touched upon the topic of micro-credentials, a new qualification for continuing education that would certainly add a value to continuing education. It is a response to the question on how to harmonize the current wide variation of certificates offered in higher education that leads to confusion and challenges related to recognition. So really taking this from the start, already 2.5 years ago, we started with exploring the potential of micro-credentials as a qualification. Maybe next coexisting to certificates and badges. So you see here an overview of certificates, badges that demonstrate the wide range of qualifications and study hours and so on. That makes it very unclear and not transparent on the actual value of continuing education course or program. We then, within the European MOOC Consortium, we developed a qualification under a micro-credential that would fit also the offerings of the universities and the needs of the learners. And we came to a framework that consists of, that corresponds with 100 to 150 study hours, 4 to 6 ECTS, within the European qualification framework level of 5 to 8 with credits, so academic. For transparency reasons, it's indeed needed that the learning objectives are clearly learning outcomes are clearly stated and provided in a transcript, diploma supplement with specifications on the learning outcomes, indicating the EQF and the ECTS earned, and all guaranteed to be taking place, the assessment within a reliable method of ID verification. So these are basic principles for the micro-credential, the common micro-credential framework that we have adopted by our MOOC platforms. And as the MOOC platforms are actually representing together more than 400 higher education institutions, we really have the substance to have a wide range of endorsement by higher education institutions for this CMS, which is currently under registration as a qualification. In short, we often see that the primary elements for a MOOC or a short learning program, the micro-credential, to be of value is that you can prove the quality that it is recognized, and of course it is also relevant for the student in a sense that it is fit the personal development as well as what is demanded from the market, from the companies. So in that sense, it needs to be relevant, and we therefore also urge always the dialogue, the connection between the providers and the sectors and entrepreneurs in developing demand-driven and responsive courses, programs under the micro-credentials. Micro-credentials also here in the Dutch acceleration plan indicated as being an added, an addition to a quality mark, as the micro-credential to third parties indicate that they can be assured that this person actually masters the knowledge or skills associated with a micro-credential. The achievement is traceable, verifiable, and the student has more control of the development path of learning by the possibility of combining programs from other universities or his own university in a stackable setting. There is assurance that the learning outcomes achieved are also recognized elsewhere, and that, and of course, the size and value of the micro-credential, as well as being offered open and online and flexible, makes it more attractive for students to upskill and further reskill. How does that now fit in the a micro-credential in the offerings of continuing education? You know, we have already the badges, the certificates, and in a wide range. So we were challenged also by how to fit micro-credentials now in the offerings of continuing education. And we have explored this and came to a division of layers, especially, and when we are talking about stackability, you have to think about layers in offerings and the stackability of that. And maybe much clearer is it when we show it in this overview. So you can find within continuing education, you can find units, small units of education that are less than an ECTS, often indicated or certified by a badge. Then you have courses, single courses that are awarded by credits. Credits in itself is, of course, also an indication of value. But when you're talking about a micro-credential program, you talk about the elements that are indicated in CMF. You need to indicate also the qualification framework and so on to make it really a qualification. So we indicated that CMF is the first full qualification there of an average of 5 ECTS. And then you can build, as we see within our universities, that they often have also programs of around 30 ECTS, which you also consider short learning programs, that you can build micro-credentials up to a bigger micro-credential program, micro degree. They can also be offered by themselves, but they can be stackable to a micro degree. So you see there different layers of offerings within continuing education that we have explored and building upon within our consortium. All has come together in our position paper and recommendations that later on will be presented to you. So I'm not taking a peek now on the recommendations yet, but next to the common micro-credential framework, the dialogue and cooperation between the labor market stakeholders, we have developed or launched recommendations that will be presented later on, as well as a portal on the implementation of MOOCs and micro-credentials. Now, for this final convention and policy forum, we want to present to you some identified labor market needs, identified common grounds for collaborations between the labor market parties, current offerings, a taster on that we want to show you. We want to indicate the opportunities of co-developing, co-delivering of MOOCs and being responsive and demand-driven in relation to the labor market. Further, explore the implementation and the concept of the use of micro-credentials, and finally also how we organize and how we can sustain the dialogue between the labor market parties also for the coming years. So in the program, this is outlined as follows: is that we first have a block on innovations in continuing education and professional development by MOOCs and micro-credentials. There will be a reflection and some presentations on current developments in this, starting with Matt Jenner from FutureLearn, followed by a sector representative of UCAPIAT, Erin Azar, then followed by the voice of the employment services from Anpal in Italy, and we will have a presentation on our recommendations by a colleague of Pierpaolo Macca later on. And as indicated, we will have the launch of the MOOC and micro-credential portal of EMC-LM. And this convention will then be closed by a presentation of Koen Nomden from the European Commission, DG Employment, on the recently launched proposal for Council recommendations for lifelong learning and employability, addressing the micro-credentials, of course, as well. And after the convention, we have a 1-hour policy forum in which we reflect and get feedback on the presented recommendations and how the different stakeholders can build on these recommendations. That is the idea of the policy later on, policy forum later on. So a full interesting program, I believe, and I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, which is Matt Jenner from FutureLearn. And I will stop sharing my screen here to make it possible for him to join.
Thank you, George. Thanks for the introduction. And it's nice to see so many people here. We're nearly at 100, so maybe give someone a nudge, see if they can join us. George, could you confirm how long you would like me to present for? 5 or 10 minutes?
Yeah, up 10 minutes possible, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. I will go at that kind of pace. Thank you. So we started this project before, I think micro-credentials were obviously in our vision, but they didn't really exist. However, 3 years down the line, they definitely very much do exist. And so in a way, this might feel for me quite cathartic to share with you, but this is a moment in time projection of areas where I feel are very important for us to focus on. And by us, I mean digital education platforms, universities, learning organizations, policymakers, interested parties, freelancers, whatever your affiliation or however many of those boxes you've just ticked. There's too much in here to probably go into. It was actually quite a large document because I was thinking about how, as FutureLearn, we try to encourage and engage higher education and learning organizations to be innovative in regards to online global education. However, we're also aware that we need to influence and cajole and try and also work with partners to understand what they need so we can all set direction together. And so I'm trying to design this around a sort of co-build, co-create. In it, we're all in this together. That's my attitude. However, some of these things might materialize and some of these things may never materialize. So that's my sort of warning label. Just to give those that don't know, just a small amount of background. Forgive me, I'm not going to present mode because I need to see my notes. But FutureLearn was founded quite a few years ago by the UK's Open University. We had co-funding in 2019 from the SEEK Group, who are large in the Asia Pacific region. And broadly, we offer about 1,000 short courses and about 50 micro-credentials that are aligned to the CMF, as George has just been sharing. And we have around 17, nearly 18 million learners globally. Our demographics are slightly different. I'm just going to hide my speaker, the panel. So we have a broad mix of learners being attracted to FutureLearn from many different continents around the world. And I think unlike other platforms, we have a slightly larger user base who identify as female. Our age range, our largest age range is 25, around 25 to 45. So that's just a bit of context and demographics with regards to who we are. And I mentioned that we're building the future together. And I mean that because 3 years ago, we didn't have micro-credentials and now we do, but we only do because we've done this in partnerships. We've done it with the EADTU and the project to develop the common micro-credential framework. And FutureLearn has done this with our partners who have bravely and boldly taken this idea of micro-credentials, built them, put them on the platform, taught them, evaluated them, run them again, and told us what worked and what didn't work. And we've learned from that. And so if I summarize what we've achieved, there are 5 areas that I think we need to focus on. And they're broadly along the sort of common life cycle. You see the life cycle amongst most sort of digital projects or design thinking. And it's really sort of at the beginning, but also at the beginning of every loop is the strategy, the planning, the approach, the direction. Then there's the planning and design. Then there's the sort of, it's a bit different, it's discovery and enrollment. So this is learners finding something and getting involved. Then learning and teaching. And then you've got learning outcomes and post-course reflections, and then hopefully it goes back in and round and round. And so that's the sort of model that I've tried to frame my thinking on. And within that, within each area, I want to highlight some real standout areas that are either already existing or have existed elsewhere, but are really ripe for maturity in the micro-credential space. And so to start off with, it would be remiss if I didn't begin with common standards. And the common micro-credential framework and finding modularity within that is absolutely critical. I think it's great for Europe. It should be great globally to have these common standards. But there are many other factors, and so many of these could have probably their own 3-year project. So there are the different commercial models that could exist. Who's the audience? Who's paying? Who's the end validator of this learning experience? They can all form into different commercial models. Content shouldn't be brand new and bespoke. It can be licensed, reused, repurposed, unbundled. There's lots of different models of which you can start to think, I want to build 10, 50, 100 micro-credentials. Where can the content come from? Micro-credentials have also been an opportunity to challenge tradition. I don't think we have to do things the way they've been done before. And we're all learning rapidly from the pandemic that that doesn't have to be the case. And then lastly, I've mentioned commercial already, but financial stimulus. Governments could be helping out by paying for innovation or paying for enrollments or contributing in ways, and I say governments, but also other organizations could be paying in ways to help make this innovation happen a bit faster and to spur on longer term business models that can evolve from this type of activity. I hope my pace is okay. I'm going to have to try and pick it up slightly. In planning and design, there are quite a lot of areas to consider, so I might have to skim a few. But this idea of when you're designing and building something like a micro-credential, you should be bringing the learner in at a very early stage. You can co-design and co-create with learners, with industry, with external experts that are bringing in their perspective. You don't have to follow the rules, and so you can break the rules intentionally. But the flip side of that is they've got academic credit, and that academic credit probably needs to be global, not just pan-European. And so we need to work out that as a remaining challenge for this group and for others, is to work out how we achieve that. We need to address the skills gap. We need to think about the fact that a micro-credential could just be a part of a degree. So why can't we just unbundle that degree and make bits of it into micro-credentials? Is it that simple? It could be. There's the whole labour market who don't know about micro-credentials, and employers who are unaware that micro-credentials exist. And I think that is another signal that there is further work there needing to be done. And lastly, learners themselves. What does one micro-credential mean with regards to 2, 3, or 4 short courses, then micro-credentials? They all start to form learning pathways. And you'll see there's a whole other page in planning and design to think about assessments, the types of learning, the types of approaches or formats that these courses can exist in. The fact that they're so innovative, maybe educators can see them as professional development opportunities. Maybe they'll get their professorial role because they've also been experimenting with new forms of digital education delivery. And that's a route into career progression. Lastly, co-branding and joint delivery could mean that a university and a global, let's say, software provider can come together and launch a micro-credential together. And we have tried that and it's worked with mixed results, but it does work as a concept. I've talked before about learner archetypes, but this is just to say you need to know your audience and understand their needs and then design for those needs. And then lastly, this has come up for decades, but it's still a great idea. Pedagogical patterns, a bit like templates, but more about reusable, great approaches to teaching and learning and assessment that can be applied and then applied again, and they can ease up that production cost or resource requirement that can often be quite a barrier. For discovery and enrollment, there are again several more factors. And so what are these things and who recognizes them and what are they worth is always going to be a topic until we can work out a way through that. They need to be available, open and accessible to learners. Their pricing is often tiered to university prices. The per credit module or unit pricing structure might soon be archaic when other companies don't care for those models and they find a way to disrupt it. Recognition of prior learning is an ongoing challenge, and how you bring that in is something that, again, could be another 3-year project. And we've launched a course portal, and I'm sure that will be introduced here, so I won't say any more about course portals. So we'll hopefully we'll see a live demo or some slides of one soon. And lastly, the idea of course portfolios. What is feature and offering? Why do we offer the courses that we have? What does it mean for a pathway? All those things need to mature alongside the development of more micro-credentials. Lost my place. Plenty more things to say. Enrollment journeys, how do people find, discover and recognize that they're suitable for this type of course? How do they pay? Do they pay less if they're in a country with a different economic model? They've got a lower GDP or they have a different economic situation. So should they pay a pro rata or should they pay the Western cost? That doesn't seem fair. And lastly, what if they're not ready to study at university level? Learners will need support to prepare them for that. In learning and teaching delivery, I know I'm just throwing lots out there, so apologies if this is just a bit too much or if you're rolling your eyes at me. But for learning and teaching, it needs to be personalized, connected. We can bring experts in who might not traditionally be educators, but they're still experts, especially with the skills agenda. Experts take a much higher place in education now, but there's still the accreditation. So we still need higher education to provide that. And then lastly, what does success even look like for a learner? And can they start and stop and that still look like a successful learning journey just because they've taken a 2-year pause because something got in their way? Maybe they need some career help. The pedagogies employed should certainly be engaging, flexible, and aware of the context that the learners are coming from. And there needs to be content models that make it just as good on a phone as it is on a high-end laptop as it might be on an e-reader, and that further introduces more challenges as devices are just different these days, and they'll only get more different when we have augmented reality glasses on ourselves. And lastly, they need support. So that's what I mean by facilitation, is who's in there, who's the expert in there to help and make sure that things are running smoothly. I'm nearly there at my last one. Outcomes and impact. I'm surprised by myself that I only had a few items here because I think this is such an important section. I feel it's so overlooked that often it's sort of underlooked as well, even in this presentation. And so stackable outcomes, that the transcripts with the learning outcomes that George mentioned in the CMF, what do they mean when you put them together? Especially if they're from different providers. They need to be there needs to be more thought around exactly what models the designers of the learning outcomes can follow so that they become stackable. And then verification, verifiable credentials, digital credentials, going from badges to credit to stacking to multi-provider to the eventual awarding organization. These are all great challenges that we can pick apart and work together on. And then lastly, what does success even look like? Is it money? Is it student happiness? Is it careers? Is it goals? Is it volume? I think these are just a whole bunch of areas. In fact, I listed them. I think there's 44 areas that just come out of the head when you start thinking, what do we need to do next? What do we need to do together to make concepts like a micro-credential as valid as a degree as we go down the road that I'm sure will be long, windy, and very entertaining for us. Thanks very much for your time. I appreciate your thoughts or questions or comments in the chat. I'll certainly be happy if you want to rip anything apart. I'll do my best to explain why I felt it was in there.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks so much. Indeed, a lot of challenges, but also many opportunities, and for all a shared responsibility of the different labor market stakeholders. And that's why we're also stressing the importance of having the dialogue and see where all are going. How does FutureLearn envision the micro-credentials and open courses? Are all courses in the micro-credential open?
It's a very good question, because most of our MOOCs, our short courses, typically some very high percentage have absolutely no sort of credential in a sort of credit worthiness state. But with learning pathways, why can't they contribute on that sort of macro level, or that modular level that we mentioned that could be part of the CMF? Retrofitting the CMF will be quite challenging, especially if quality varies and the length and the type of course varies. But I don't think that's an impossible challenge. I think that's a good challenge to start picking on. Good question.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Matt. We have to continue now also and see from the perspective of the sectors. Okapiat, your reflection by Erin Azar, please.
Okay, so I will share my screen.
Please.
It's okay, I think.
Yeah,
You all see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Hello, everyone. Sorry. From the perspective of Okapiat, so let's try to give a nice perspective. Okay. Maybe I will skip this part and let it like Matt. It's more easy to present this way. Just I will do so. Okay. So Okapiat, just to remind for everyone, is the skills operator for agriculture, fisheries, food industries, and territories. So we have a lot of companies which are very little companies, less than 50 employees, sorry. It's almost 98% of our companies, and 93% of our companies are less than 10 employees. So we have a lot of difficulties to support them in changing their view on the digital learning and about MOOC, for instance. We need to respond to the skill needs of our sectors, and our sectors' lack of attractiveness. It's difficult to attract new future workers every day. Therefore, we have many partnerships as with FunMooc and Anya. FunMooc, you all know the partner, I think. And Anya is the agency for food and drinks in France. And we support also, we are trying to support the digital transformation of our company's activities and vocational training. And also the training offer in order to meet the needs of the labor market. But it's quite challenging every day. Okay. And what is more challenging for us actually now is that we have a reform of vocational training, and it modifies the governance of the Okapiat organization. We are encountering more difficulties about our juridical framework and what we are able to do regarding the law of the training. So we are very limited in what we propose to our companies, and our services must reach the French public. So you can imagine how it is complicated. For instance, we have created an e-learning platform, and on its e-learning platform, we can't allow foreign companies. That's a big problem. So those 2 points are the major challenges that we are facing right now. we need to find ways to go further, and we need especially to work with you all, and also with FunMooc on the Gradio micro-credential framework, which will be a way for us, if we manage to applicate it to our organization. So I'm not going to talk again about our other challenges that have been exposed many times. I will share with you this presentation. This is all listed right now. You can read it, but it's a bit long, so I will skip. Oh, sorry, on the second part. Okay, to speak more about our current developments. So as I was just explaining, we have created an e-learning platform. This e-learning platform, 1 year after its creation, still have difficulties to reach the public. There are several reasons to that. I will explain after. It's not easy because our companies are very small, and their knowledge about training in general, not even digital training, but training the classical form, is very low and poor. Every day we have to struggle with them to make them understand the need to train all the lifelong their employees to meet the need of skills of our sectors. So it's not easy. On this platform, we are trying every day to develop the services. For instance, it's hosting a virtual reality, and also auto-diagnostic, I'm gonna say it, auto-diagnostic of digital maturity to help firms to know what are the needs of digital skills in their structure, and to give them leads to develop the digital skills of their employees. So I'm going very quickly, I'm sorry. So it was about that. So, and also, what is new now, we are working with Anya. So Anya, the French agency for drinks and food, and other partner from Belgium and Austria, Alimento and LVA, to create a 3D environment simulating the machines and equipment of food industry. And this production, this training will be hosted also in the company platform. We are trying to centralize everything because we could notice with our experience that our firms and our public in general were lost. There are many solutions, digital solutions, but it's everywhere and nowhere. So our aim is to centralize every production, digital production, on our e-learning platform, which will finally become more than an e-learning platform at the end, maybe a collaborative platform and a collaborative place to work. We'll see. We'll see what we are able to do. So, and we have also a partnership, a Mooc partnership with FunMooc, our historical partner, with FunMooc and also the University of Caen, which is in the north of France, sorry. We created a Mooc to train and develop skills. This year, there is already a session which is played, and its specificity is on innovation and management. So this Mooc is very well known in our sectors and very demanded, if I can say it like this. Each year we have new employees, and not just employees, a very large public, which is following this MOOC, we have a lot of demand. So each year we update the MOOC and we play it. So we can see that there is a large impact of the MOOC training, but after I will speak a little bit more about how to say other aspects that are not very in favor of digital learning finally in general, in our sectors specifically. So we also created a MOOC with 5 agri-food industries in the Loire region, Agro-Mousquetaire, Aubray, Bigard, Lactalis, and Saint-Michel, to recruit on jobs that were intention in our sectors. The jobs are maintenance, technician, machine operator, and line operator. These trades, as it's written, are representative in a high proportion in the agri-food industries, and job offers are numerous. So we wanted to try an innovative way to recruit further employee for those work, and to make them discover also jobs, because finally there are a lot of offers, but not a lot of suppliers, if I can say, and also because those jobs are not very well known. Also, it's again a problem of attractiveness, but also of a lack of knowledge. I'm going to about those jobs. So it was a little success. I say little because maybe there was 100 further employees, applicants who were reaching this innovative way of being recruited. It's not enough. I mean, we have to go further than that. But what I can say is also that the National Agency of Employment here in France use a lot the MOOC to orient, to help to search a job and to recruit also. So, meaning while, I mean, it's working, but we have to go further at our level in Okapia, I mean. Not enough companies ask us to recreate this MOOC. I mean, we have not enough demand, so that's pity. Ways forward. Okay, so services such as our e-learning platform, as I told you a little bit earlier, were very welcomed. Nevertheless, figures are not as exponential as expected. Yes, I mean, we have an increasing numbers of people who are linked to our platform every day. Yes, they can appreciate what we have shared with them, what we have created, but they are not going any further. So we need them to be more active, if I can say. Problem is, they need really to be supported in the digital tools they use. And finally, they need support in educational engineering of classic and digital training. This is a big lack in our sector. A lot of very little companies and absolutely no knowledge on how to do it. And also, what is not written on here, the need funds. It has a cost. Whether it's MOOC or whatever e-learning training, they need funds to invest, they need time also. And I like this sentence that is written: it is necessary to surpass the knowledge of digital tools for more support, changes in uses and cultural transitions. In our sector, it's really, really important and real. I mean, agriculture, industry, food industries, they are very, very late. They need to be really supported. And for sure, I think it's the mission of the OPCO, of OCAPIAT, I mean, to support such initiatives and perhaps to join forces with the counterparts as this partnership here today, more broadly and with greater rights to the entire field of employment and training, sure, which is very important today. A big challenge is to advocate for a more flexible legal framework at the level of the OPCO, because as I explained to you, we are very limited in our juridical framework. For instance, we can't allow foreign companies to use our services, big problem. And we need so to extend it to the European zone and micro-credential framework. We need to continue to work with FunMooc on the Gradeo micro-credential framework for sure. And I hope we will find a way to link it with our e-learning platform, which is not possible, I think, right now. So that's it for me. I hope I was clear.
Yes, very much so, Irene. And yeah, I think it also indicates the important role MOOC platforms play here in connecting also offerings from higher education institutions, from providers, being a bridge between companies, sectors, and the providers. The MOOC platforms can be very close to the sectors and the companies, as is shown in France. I don't know if there's any question there specifically. Yeah, presentations will be shared. Thanks so much, Irene. And we will continue now from the point of view of the employment agencies from ANPAL in Italy. Alessandra, please.
Yes, good morning. Yes, indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a few seconds to share my screen. Yes. Can you see it?
Yes, very well.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you in advance for your attention here. I will present you briefly the experience of our agency, the ANPAL, which is, just a few remind for those who cannot know before, a governmental agency born in 2017 and depending on the Ministry of Labor and Social Policies in Italy, dealing with active labor policies in the country on a national basis and coordinating the PES at national level, but also in the middle of reinforced cooperation with private labor agencies in the country. We have been part of the project consortium since the beginning, and we have tried to convey the energies that were necessary to accompany a difficult transition in the country, in general, not only in the country, in the whole world, but in Italy in particular, which was due to the long economic crisis of the last decade, but more recently to the disruption of employment and the loss of competitiveness caused by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. More in depth, the reaction to the COVID crisis represented in my country a huge difficulty, of course, but also at the same time a challenging dimension for rethinking training and active labor policies. In terms of innovations, of the policies devoted not only to, in general, to the sector of education and vocational training, but also towards adult learning. In fact, the advent of distance learning and agile working, born in the very first phase of the emergency periods, and then rapidly accepted as the best solution at hand, has concretely boosted the development of digitization in my country in all the sectors, while the stop to mobility already revamped the debate around the need for greener economies and protected environment. Despite of that, as you might see from the first slide, the current crisis is in the short term represents, of course, a loss of competitiveness of the whole system, from labor to education. If policies cannot use this opportunity to increase reskilling and upskilling pathways especially for that part of the population which is more at risk of social exclusion and at risk of technological exclusion, let's say, so the adults particularly. To face this situation in Italy, we have tried to do our best to exercise the resilience through a systematic approach. That is the approach that we have tried to outline in the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, declining the funding of the Next Generation EU. As a result, in the next 5 years, investments are provided in the country to revamp active labor policies and trying to reshape also lifelong learning policies with a focus on upskilling and reskilling pathways in digital and green economy. This is particularly important because we know from the quotes that I've taken from the European Skills Agenda towards 2030, these two transitions are extremely linked and depend very much on workers with the right skills. And of course, the current pandemic event has further accelerated this phenomenon and has already put a focus on that in the idea of reinforcing skills anticipation mechanism and skills mechanisms for adapting the workforce to change in labor markets. As you might see, there are a lot of obstacles because very few people take part in my country in the learning process at the level of continuing education, especially. The reasons are various. We have got difficulties in financial resources, and a part of this of the answer will come from the funding, which, as I said before, will be extremely important. But also we need guidance tools, because it emerges the need for also providing guidance tools and policies to activate skills demand. That was in the last decade very, very low, due probably for a lack of awareness about self-learning needs of this target group of the population, and also due to other specific process. A clear example of what I said before is represented by the story of digital skills that are transversal and necessary nowadays, also in the past, but nowadays in a crucial way, but encounter a great mismatch in not only in the young population, but also in the adult learning. 95% of current jobs require more than basic digital skills, but in 2019 in Italy, only at least 50% of adult population had basic digital skills. So this gap is getting worse by 2030 if we don't use this occasion to provide actions to try to invert this trend. So let me show you briefly what what we have tried to start up in the very first phase of 2020, also by being part by the partnership within the EMC project. As you might see from the slide, AMPAL is now equipped and manages 2 web platforms devoted to remote training. Both platforms are accessible, are freely accessible, as we are a public agency, so we use public funding, and we cannot at the moment foresee private involvement in the platform, but we hopefully that it will be soon a partnership in the future. This platform are open to citizens and operators after a registration with a national system for the verification of electronic identity that we call SPID in the country, and are accessible through a virtual desktop that is My AMPAL. As I said before, the first is a broad audience oriented platform where every citizen can register and access for free a series of courses offered through Mooc. And the second is devoted to PES operator mainly, but nevertheless, operator in general, working and being entitled of tasks within employment job center. These are the URL and web address of the 2 platforms. And the first one, My Learning AMPAL, is, as I said, dedicated to all citizens and has been developed and built through the Moodle. So far, more than 150,000 citizens registered and use the platform. And the platform offers 3 kinds of macro categories of learning provisions that are, as I said, freely available in the portal. As you may see, the 3 macro categories are grouping courses in some fields. We offer 6 kinds of different courses in labor policies, 10 courses in digital skills, and other 6 courses for corporate welfare. These courses are structured and provides a final assessment towards the citizen that apply. But we are now developing the proof of learning that it's not still managed and implemented so far. Going to the other, My Learning Operatori, which, as I said, is devoted and dedicated to operators of employment centers. Also, this second platform managed by the AMPAL has been developed and built with Moodle. And the numbers are fewer because it is targeted oriented. But nevertheless, more than 8,000 operators are registered all across the country. Courses are developed at the national level, but then they are offered on a regional basis because of the specificity of local labor markets. And so the main kind of courses that are offered are active labor policies tools courses. Here I put the 2 major initiatives that we manage as a public agency in terms of active labor policies, which are called Reddito di cittadinanza and Assegno di ricollocazione. They are measures for activating people in entering new job opportunities. And the other is a national project that is aimed at strengthening the skills of PES operators in managing process of upskilling and reskilling of workers that are affected by economic crisis, especially in medium and big size company. So this is a framework in which the initiative that I showed have been realized so far. But we think that's a major challenging period, and great opportunities are now at stake, as the definition and the presentation of the Council recommendation on micro-credential will enable considerable policy developments in offering more structured reskilling and upskilling micro-credential pathways for the labor market. This is really important to address the current needs of the population, of our population, especially the adult workers, but not only, also the young people, for example, that are entitled of specific programs such as, for example, the Youth Guarantee Initiative. And this is really crucial for addressing skills mismatch, for supporting recognition of training opportunities, and enabling also tools for validation of competencies from non-formal and informal learning. And in the end, also to promote social inclusion of lower skilled people and workers and vulnerable groups. Of course, the idea of supporting on the whole the digital transition is a challenge at stake, and is guiding us in assuring good quality of the training provided. Thank you for your attention here. You can see my contact details and also the contact details of my colleague, which is linked to the meeting, Saverio Pescuma, for every kind of questions or thoughts, whatever. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alessandra. Thanks so much. With this, we have had the voice of all the providers, the platforms, the sectors and entrepreneurs and employment agencies, and we will get more to know about the proposal on the council recommendation later on from Koen, for which we already I can tell you that we will need some more time than the program scheduled now. So we will go with the convention a bit more into the time of the policy forum, up to we take 10 minutes, 15 minutes longer of the convention than to capture it all. Thanks, Alessandra. Let us then go to the outcomes of the of EMC-LM, because in a sense that we formulated recommendations per stakeholder. So, like we said, we not only have the stakeholders just mentioned, those three, but we have also more with the governments and so on. So let's check the recommendations presented by Maka from University of Foggia. And we will not, I already promise you, we will not go through all the recommendations word by word, but Maka will give an impression, I believe. Maka.
Hello, everybody. I'm presenting today something that is not exactly mine, but an outcome of a collaboration. And I'm representing the University of Foggia, but also at Open at this level. And also sort of replacing Pierpaolo, who is not able to join us today. So the objectives of this recommendation is to promote the collaboration between Mooc platforms, universities, and labor market organizations. As we already talked about it, it's extensively overviewed and presented, to promote and enhance the link with the Mooc offerings and micro-credentials for the labor market, promote sustainable interfaces between Mooc platforms, universities, and the labor market for matching needs and provisions, to promote the recognition of micro-credentials and enhance and promote the continuous dialogue on these issues between the stakeholders, between the governments and the EU level. So main ideas are represented here in the logic of stakeholders. So for the Mooc platforms, we have several recommendations. The blue represents the most important parts that we would like to underline. But overall, we recommend to develop a medium and long-term strategic plan for MOOCs and micro-credentials and cooperate with universities and external stakeholders, support universities in the development of skills. Do you hear me? Any problems?
Yes, and
Okay, somebody has a microphone.
yeah.
Build a consistent framework for awards and qualifications, and where possible, make it stackable, facilitate fluid credential evaluation of MOOCs and micro-credentials, and position MOOC platforms in the European Commission's concept for the University of Future 2030. As for the universities, the collaboration with MOOC platforms to enable such flexible and large-scale delivery of MOOCs and micro-credentials is recommended, and to promote medium and long-term strategic plans to create such plans for MOOCs and micro-credentials, create pedagogical guidelines for the design and development of MOOCs and micro-credentials, and promote consistent institutional qualification structure for continuing education and professional development. And as you will have these recommendations, I will just underline the most important parts here. Universities are recommended to also look at the stackability of MOOCs and micro-credentialing. This is a highly important point according to the recommendations, and use MOOCs and micro-credentials also as mobility windows. And also develop business models for continuing education and professional development. Other stakeholders are recommended, such as sectors and enterprises, to integrate MOOCs and online micro-credentials in the human resources policies of these sectors and enterprises. And also, it is recommended to collaborate with MOOC platforms and universities to develop sector-specific micro-credentials and learning spaces. For the public employment services, we recommend to inform MOOC platforms and universities on the national and regional needs and promote activities of training organizations and services to support competencies and career development. Co-create with MOOC platforms and universities micro-learning units, MOOCs and micro-credential courses and programs. Such co-creation is highly important, as we already saw in the project, and it works well, and it actually promotes such synergies, and by balancing out all the partner involvement, also taking the best out of this. And on the governmental level, collaboration with MOOC platforms, higher education institutions and stakeholder groups are recommended to develop policies for building a national ecosystem for lifelong learning, and to create such dialogue again with MOOC platforms and improve the funding of MOOCs and micro-credentials. This has emerged as one of the important issues, the financial issues also in this regard. At the European level, we want to integrate and recognize continuing education and professional development for micro-credentials in the Bologna process. And for making this happen, we should use the Bologna tools that already exist to define micro-credential qualifications. It should be advisable to create a permanent dialogue in order to involve all the stakeholders for continuing education and professional development, and collaborate with the universities, networks, and stakeholders to recognize such micro-credentials as a formal part of European educational area. And of course, development of policies for the large-scale development is highly important. This is an outline that George already presented, so I will not discuss this anymore. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Maka. Yeah, indeed, that's a comprehensive overview. And what you see is that the word collaborate is often repeated, and that is also what we underline, that we see this as a start, an establishment of a continued dialogue between the labor market stakeholders that is of importance to make it really happen in delivering online flexible continuing education offerings with the micro-credential qualification, and integrate that in the educational systems at national and European level. Thanks so much, Maka. I see a question here about the stackability. Maybe Matt Chandler, I don't know if you're there. The question, who decides on stackability of Mooc credentials to what degree?
I think Mooc credentials are quite a challenging thing to stack. We sort of discussed it earlier. Micro credentials are a lot easier because they follow the CMF. I still think stacking micro credentials is a challenge. MOOCs are that challenge with a multiplier attached because they are not necessarily designed against a framework. They are much more open in their original design. And so would the learning outcomes be recognized, for example, is just one extra challenge that we add to, is the brand of that MOOC partner even recognized by the person that's offering any form of stackability? I think these are all open challenges that we've dabbled in, but no one has really come up with clear answers.
Thanks. And another question is about solutions seen to support strong identification of students and micro-qualification participants. Anyone of the platforms to reply on that? What solutions are seen to support strong identification?
Is that identification as in verifying the identity of the individual? If so, we have tried that on FutureLearn with driving license and passport verification, but we used a third party because they have that capability that we would never want to do in-house. So you can buy those kinds of services, but that's only at the point of proof. It doesn't necessarily, you know, they show it like this. It doesn't necessarily say that that person is the same person throughout the whole experience. And for that, I think that we need to look at innovative pedagogies and innovative assessment methods. You're always able to cheat. If that is your motivation, you'll always be able to cheat.
Yeah, which is also the case in physical situations. On-campus situations can also be possible. ED2 is publishing a publication on specifically on e-assessment, which is explored by some 15 of our members towards a recommendation and report and mapping of e-assessment methodologies in the beginning of 2022. Pete, you have your hand raised. Yeah, you're muted.
Yes, about this stackability, this is a very interesting topic, I think, and I had just a side remark there. So when we talked about micro-credentials, we have always linked this to stackability, although now we see that MOOC platforms like FutureLearn, and Matt can comment on that as well. FutureLearn is now developing micro-credentials in their own right, just following the needs of people of the labor market and so on. Yeah, normally as a standard situation with MOOC platforms, I would say that micro-credentials or MOOCs and micro-credentials are developed in collaboration with a university that takes the academic responsibility for delivering credits and also for delivering a micro-credential qualification. And so there's always already a university there, at least one in most cases, that will recognize a micro-credential. And if this is not the case, then I think universities are prepared to recognize the qualifications of a micro-credential via the procedures of the recognition of prior learning. That's the other procedure. So there are two ways forward there. The first one is building on the collaboration of the MOOC platform and the university in charge, I would say, involving perhaps also a company. And at the other hand, if this is not possible, then always there is the procedure for the recognition of prior learning and or experience. And well, that's perhaps important to notice. Yeah.
Thanks, Pete, for this additional remark on that. Thanks. And then we will take forward these recommendations, share these with the stakeholders. And thanks, Maka, for presenting them. and we will give follow-up on that in the coming period, and by addressing the stakeholders specifically on that. And in the policy forum, we will have some reflections on the recommendations as well. On the further implementation of the MOOCs and micro-credentials for the labor market, we have from within the project developed a portal on which Francisco from Myriad X will give a short explanation.
Yeah. Hello, how are you? Thanks, George. I'll leave you first of all here a link in the chat for you all to be able to get into the portal, and very quickly just to have a look on this website. This is a common work together also with all the partners. We've been working on this portal, and as you may see, this MOOCs for you. What brings along together is the offer of the partners in the EMC-LM project. Basically, what we've got here, as you can see, are some categories of the offer and the providers. We have also, we'll now take a look at that, but we have also this, who are we, basically just to make this framework for the users, just to check it out, which are our aims, which are our objectives in the project of the EMC-LM project, our purpose and our stakeholders. And we take a look also here for the partners. We've got here a link of every of the partners that are together in this project. And finally, the stakeholders, which are basically who is this project for companies who can give this offer of contents for the employees, all the government entities, of course, learners who are finally the big beneficiaries of the formation, also public employment service, universities, and the sector organizations. In this site, this is who we are, and we have, by the way, also a helping hand here for the users to leave us a message if they need anything, if they are looking for something, if they are companies, organism, or whatever, they can give us here a message for us to help them. Back in the offer of the platform, as mentioned before, what we have basically are the main categories of the offer of the contents and the providers. We can, this is first filter of the offer that we have in the portal. For example, if you go to MediaDAX, you can find some information about this platform and some of the courses that are offered here in this platform from MediaDAX. The same for every of the partners here, okay, of the providers. If we go through categories, for example, you can see we have some categories of any of the courses. If we go, for example, in business, administration, and law, we will find, first of all, what is this category about, what is included in this category, which courses are currently being offered in this category for every of the partners of the provider of content. And you have here also on the left a filter, some filters far beyond the category as a first filter. You can place here when does the course start, the duration of the same one, the workload, how many time you have to spend working in this course, also some price, the providers, how many ECTs are given in the course, and even the language. Okay, you have here this filter. You will find here the results of the filter, and then if you go into any of the course, for example, this one, you can go to read more, and you will find some more information about it. The aim of the course, what is this course for? Okay, you can find here also on the right some of the main topics of the course, the syllabus, when does it start, and so on. The learning outcomes, methodology, some requirements of this course, and the recognition that it gives for the users. If the users is interested on the course, can go to the course website, and here you will finally go to the course itself. All right, in this case about Future Learn the course, so you can here join the course. Okay, so basically this is what we have been working for in this portal. I think it's also interesting to remark that the offers that are going to be included here in this portal as the main portal of the offer of the contents of the EMC-LM consortium is that we've been trying to make it the more sustainable possible for the partners, also for the providers. So let's say in an automatic way, we are bringing the offer from their platforms to here to this Moocs for You web. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco. Very clear. And I think the main benefits is that it is cross-country. You find offerings from different countries in Europe. You can select also as a user that you want to have an offering that has a micro-credential.
Exactly.
Button for that. It is just a start now. We will upload more, but it should become a portal which is owned by the providers and the employment agencies and the companies. And I think when Mooc platforms look at what MOOCs are used very often by different sectors, they know what MOOCs are popular and most relevant, and will place them then also on this portal as a European offering. So it will grow in attention and added value, and we will put a lot of effort in that, increasing the outreach and involvement of the stakeholders in the coming years to extend this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, George. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. And now we come to, and of course you have more time than the 7 minutes left for the convention now, Koen. Please take your time on that. We take that within the policy forum. We have the presentation by Koen on the latest publication by the European Commission.
Yeah, hello, George. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I was enjoying the previous presentations. I will now try to upload to share mine. I hope this will work. Oh yeah. Okay. Do you see this?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, and now I move to the first page. Yes. I will try presentation mode, but sometimes this goes wrong. So you have to tell me whether you will also see the next slide. Okay. Oh. Okay, I don't know which screen you see currently of mine. Screen sharing has stopped. I see. Look,
no. It was working.
It was working, but something stupid happens because it tells me that my screen sharing has stopped as the shared window is closed.
I think you have to do the procedure again.
Yeah, and now I am having this stupid thing. Okay. Look, can I do it without slides?
Yes.
Yeah, is that okay? Because I will then send you the slides later, because I think my camera, I have some difficulties with slide sharing. I will send the slides later, and I think it's not a real problem if I do it without slides.
Yeah, we will share the slides later on with the participants. Yeah.
Okay, no, that is very good. So yeah, first of all, now thanks very much for this for the invitation. I will present to you today then the proposal by the Commission for a Council recommendation on a European approach to micro-credentials for lifelong learning and employability. And I think both terms here are very important. Focus is on lifelong learning and employability. And you can see already from the title that this is a proposal for a recommendation. I want to stress also, this is not a recommendation. This is the proposal for the recommendation that was adopted by the Commission on Friday, 10 December, together with a proposal for individual learning accounts. I will also share the link to the press release, and from there you can get access to the different documents. So this is a proposal. This will now go to the Council of Ministers, to the member states, and it will be negotiated and hopefully adopted under the French presidency, and then of course it will be implemented. Now, what it does is that, first of all, it looks at problems. Now, why do we have this proposal for a Council recommendation? It's to address, of course, certain challenges, certain problems. There is, first of all, a policy challenge. A growing number of people need to update their knowledge, as Alessandra also said, and colleagues before. Skills, competence, we have the green and digital transition that we need to make. There is also the target adopted by the Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan earlier this year, which said that at least 60% of adults should be participating in training every year. This is a very ambitious goal because I think we are around 30%. And of course also, yeah, employment target is there, but the European Pillar of Social Rights is together also with the education area and the skills agenda, of course, is really the guiding policy framework of the initiative for micro-credentials. At the same time, we see, and we have seen this also here, a rising number of micro-credentials globally and in Europe, not always called perhaps micro-credentials. There's a lot of, yeah, the landscape is not so clear. So there is a lack of clarity, and the value and understanding of micro-credentials is therefore not always so clear. There is, of course, a very, very wide range also of providers. And there are questions on quality, transparency, uptake, but also, okay, how can you stack perhaps micro-credentials? How can they travel also between countries? How can they travel between sectors and from one job to another? As you know, we have gone through quite a long process of consultation. There was also an ad hoc expert group. You have been doing a lot of work, of course, in your consortium. And yeah, in the end, this has resulted, including and basing also on the results of the open public consultation in the proposal that we currently have on the table. And when we look at the objectives, actually the text distinguishes three objectives. The first one is to enable people to acquire the knowledge, the skills, competences they need to thrive in a changing labor market and society, so they can really benefit from a socially and fair recovery from COVID-19, but also in order to achieve the green and digital transitions that are needed. Secondly, also to support the preparedness of providers, focus on providers of micro-credentials to enhance transparency and flexibility of the learning offer in order to empower people to go to learning, but also to empower people to find their own career pathways, which we know the career pathways, but also the learning pathway is becoming more individualized. And then a third element, very important also for European Commission perspective, is to foster the inclusiveness and equal opportunities, and to contribute through this to resilience of the population, but also social fairness, but of course also prosperity. When we look at the scope, as I said, the scope is quite broad. And when you look at the text, it refers to the coverage of micro-credentials and policies that can support the effective design and use of micro-credentials. An important element also is that with the proposal, the Commission does not aim to replace or to disrupt existing education and training or existing qualifications, but rather to complement these, right? And to add on to what already exists, and it proposes to do this by establishing a European approach to the ongoing and emerging provision of micro-credentials. Now, the proposal itself contains basically three main components, we could say. First of all, a component which we could refer to as building blocks. A second component which consists of recommendations. And the third block which consists of, okay, what is being done in education, training and skills policies, and what is being done in active labor market policies. The recommendations are addressed to the member states, and also the recommendations include invitations to the Commission to support micro-credentials, to support also the work of the member states. Now, we have a lot discussed in all kinds of fora about the definition. And so the definition is also explicitly mentioned in the body of the proposal for the recommendation. And so this is a proposed definition. And it corresponds, I think, very well to the definition that the Commission had already presented also in the past, that was based on the work of an ad hoc expert group that looked at micro-credentials that was in operation in the year 2020. And this definition has the following elements. I'm reading it out, you will get it on the slides, but micro-credential means the record of learning outcomes that the learner has acquired following a small volume of learning. These learning outcomes have been assessed against transparent and clearly defined standards. And courses leading to micro-credentials are designed to provide the learner with specific knowledge, skills, competences that respond to needs, societal, personal, cultural, or labor market needs. Micro-credentials are owned by the learner, but can also be shared and are portable. They may be standalone or combined into larger credentials. And they are underpinned by quality assurance following agreed standards in the relevant sector or area of activity. So this definition, okay, maybe a bit long, but covers also the broad scope of the recommendation. It's fairly close also, if you look at it, to the definition of what is a qualification, because learning outcomes are there, standards are there, and assessment against standards is there. But there is also the dimension of quality assurance, and there is a dimension of specificity of skills and competences. There is the element of the volume, but the volume itself is not specified. There is not a specific number of credits, ECTS credits linked to that volume. And also the definition pays attention to stackability, which I think myself is very important of micro-credentials, but it is, as when one studies the landscape, is not a given. It's not a universal given yet. But the definition, aims to be broad, and this is the definition that we have to see in the context of the European approach. A second building block consists of standard elements to describe the micro-credential. And here you see elements that are typically parts, we would say, of credentials, like identification of the learner, the title of the micro-credential, the country, region of the issue, the awarding body, the date, the learning outcomes, the notional workload, if possible, expressed in terms of ECTS credits, also the level of the learning experience, and then also a link to the qualifications framework, European, national, if applicable, and the text both refers to the EQF and the framework of the higher education area, also the type of assessment, the form of participation in the learning activity, and the type of quality assurance. And then finally, also, it contains the third building block of principles for design and issuance of micro-credentials. Now, member states are invited to adopt this common definition, to also use these standard elements to describe the micro-credential, and also to adopt these principles for the design and issuance of micro-credentials. As I said before, we have recommendations to member states and recommendations to the Commission. Recommendations to the member states, in addition to the adoption of the definition and the standard elements and the principles for design and issuing, include also recommendations on the development of an ecosystem for micro-credentials. They contain also the invitation to deliver on the potential of micro-credentials, and also recommendations related to implementation. And when we look at the ecosystem, elements there are that member states should facilitate the ongoing development and emerging development of micro-credentials in higher education, by higher education institutions, by VET providers, and also make sure that there is public funding available. But this ecosystem element does not just address the formal learning part, it also addresses the non-formal and informal learning settings in which micro-credentials are also developed. And including here is also that member states should adapt procedures for recognition of prior learning or procedures of validation of non-formal and informal learning, and to allow for the award of micro-credentials. And further, that member states should support quality and transparency of micro-credentials, including also here supporting the use of systems of skills intelligence that analyze labor market trends and therefore skill needs, and also ensuring that providers publish catalogs of micro-credentials they are offering. And I think your consortium is also providing here a very good example. And then finally, as part of the ecosystem, the invitation to member states also to integrate micro-credentials in their national qualifications framework or systems where relevant. Of course, up to each member state to discuss and to see, okay, whether this is possible, and if so, how this is possible. And finally, as part of this ecosystem, and I think this is a very important element, to establish partnerships, to work together with stakeholders, education and training stakeholders, social partners, employers, industry, civil society organizations. Then member states are also invited to deliver on the potential of micro-credentials. And this contains actually two strands. On the one hand, a strand related to more in particular education and training. And on the other hand, a strand related more to employment policies and active labor market policies. When we look into the education and training systems, this again refers to inclusion of micro-credentials in catalogs for learning, but also to use micro-credentials to improve access to education and training. So also here an inclusion element. Now there is a whole list. I'm not going to read it out. Then when we look at the employment and active labor market policy side, here we see an invitation to member states, to use micro-credentials in the context of these policies to address skills mismatches, to address also bottlenecks in given economic sectors and regions. And also secondly, to upskill and reskill workers for jobs that are in demand on the labor market. And this, of course, you can see through skills intelligence. Then there is also a link built to individual learning accounts. So at the same day, on the same day that the proposal on micro-credentials was adopted by the Commission also adopted a proposal on inviting member states to set up individual learning accounts. And the Council recommendation proposal, of course, makes the link because it says that member states are also invited to include training courses leading to micro-credentials in national registries of recognized training opportunities that may be linked to individual learning accounts or other systems of training support. Also here, a reference specifically to the self-employed and the non-standard workers, including platform workers. And as you know, there was another proposal last week also on platform workers issued by the Commission, not a Council recommendation, but really employment legislation, and a specific focus on disadvantaged vulnerable groups, and also a link there to the youth guarantee. Then as last points here, also a link to ENIC-NARIC, so an invitation for member states to support national and European, the ENIC-NARIC network to develop recognition procedures for micro-credentials. And then also a focus on lifelong guidance to support individuals in making the right choices for learning. And finally, to make best use of funding. Of course, on the one hand, national funding, on the other hand, also European funding. And this European funding really sums up a broad range of European funding possibilities, which are there, which go beyond Erasmus+, because the education and training community always looks at Erasmus+, but there is not so much, of course, there. There is also the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and many other funding possibilities that could be explored. Then finally, there is also a body of, we could say, recommendations to the Commission, to the European Commission, to support micro-credentials, to support member states in implementing the recommendation. And this is, among these are, for example, to support the development of guidelines, how to use, existing EU and Bologna process instruments in higher education to the internal and external quality assurance of micro-credentials. Also to explore, whether the ECTS system needs to be modified. And again, also guidance notes. Commission is invited to prepare guidance notes on how to include micro-credentials in national qualifications frameworks. And finally, also here to support the development of the European Student Card Initiative to allow students to share outcomes of micro-credentials electronically, in a secure way with other education and training institutions. Also a lot of focus on, the European University Alliances and the VET, Vocational Education and Training Centers of Excellence, that have recently been created, and also the Pact for Skills. And in terms of technical implementation, the Commission will support member states through, also the further development of the Europass platform. In particular, in relation to the provision of information on learning opportunities leading to micro-credentials that follow the European approach to micro-credentials. And of course, these data come from member states. I think we have seen a few interesting platforms where I think that it would be nice to connect them to the Europass platform. Then secondly, support for authentication of micro-credentials. So a bit of a complicated word, but this is what is in the text, through the European Digital Credentials for Learning. Meaning actually that in the Europass platform, we have to develop the European Digital Credentials for Learning infrastructure, and that provide verifiable credentials, and to develop it also specifically for micro-credentials. And one of the things that we aim to do is to build also a micro-credential stacking tool. We have not done this yet, but of course, once this proposal is hopefully adopted, then we can work and start working on the development of the further development of the platform to do this. And in this context, the text refers to support for portability, for interoperability, exchange and sharing of information, and also focuses there on a European open standard. Final point is that the Commission is also invited to support further research on micro-credentials, on the uptake of the micro-credentials, on the outcomes and benefits for learners, also on their added value compared to and in complement to traditional provision, of education, training and qualifications. So the research agenda is open there, and it invites actually the Commission and member states to work together on more data collection. Now, in terms of governance, there is no specific governance institution or committee that is established through or is proposed through the recommendation, but rather existing frameworks should be used, existing groups should be used, and member states should implement the recommendation as soon as possible after adoption, and they are invited to submit a plan within 12 months after adoption of the recommendation. And in this plan, they should set out measures that they have taken at the national level to support the achievement of the objectives of the recommendation by 2025. And also within 5 years, there will be an evaluation of this recommendation. So that is really what is in the recommendation. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. I'm also sorry that I wasn't able to share my slides. I will go to the normal modus again, but I promise you that I will share my slides. I will send them to George and colleagues, and I will also copy a link in the chat where you can see the document. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kuno. And the time was needed for that, to have a full explanation on what the micro-credentials will bring to the system. And they certainly make a change by having added value to continuing education. On the other hand, like you reassured everybody, it's not changing in the sense that it will coexist to the other systems that stay in place, of course, with the certificates and the badges and all. So it doesn't disrupt the system, but it has an added value by including it into the educational system and making it part of the national system. So we certainly want to further support that in the coming years, also at national level. I understand that we have several panelists that would like to reflect on this. I would like to start with Liz, because I know Liz Marr has to leave. Has to leave earlier than others, so I would like to give the floor to Liz first.
Okay, thanks, George. Can you hear me okay? Yep, good. So very sorry to be kind of jumping in and then running out again. I was scheduled to be chairing this final session, but unfortunately I've got a meeting that I've got to chair internally, so I've got 10 minutes basically. So I thought I'd just make a few quick comments, and then I'll hand over to George to chair the session. Sorry that I was only able to join late as well, because it sounds like there's some really interesting conversations going on, and just reflecting on the last presentation, I think my thoughts had been we're covering a lot of what we heard there. I guess I'm thinking about some long-running themes in higher education, and particularly going back to those age-old debates, which certainly happen in England and the UK and possibly happen elsewhere. And that's, what is university for? And I think if we reflect on that, what university is for changes over time. And we're now at a time where there is very much a heavy focus on universities as being generators of economic competitiveness, of skills development, and very much focused on employability. And there's almost a sense of there's an expected return on investment in terms of the government will put money into higher education, but they will expect the return on that investment to furnish the skills that are required to keep that kind of economic competitiveness going. So So it's within that context that some of the long running themes about things like lifelong learning, credit recognition and credit transfer have been, I guess, persisting over very many years. And it's very frustrating for those of us who can see how beneficial that would be to society generally, rather than just to the economy, that it never gains the traction, despite the focus of it in a lot of the kind of the history of the European Commission, for example. So I struggle with a number of questions related to what university is for and how it should operate. And one of the questions is that I think we should ask is, who decides what is learned and what is valued? And I think that is important, because hitherto it's the people in the universities who've decided what should be learned and what should be valued. And actually it's maybe time has come where we start to think much more about what society needs us to deliver. And I'm thinking particularly about what's happened during the COVID, during the pandemic, when we've been locked down for a couple of years, and thinking about new ways of living and new ways of working. So I guess that kind of preamble is that you're thinking to yourselves, what on earth has this got to do with micro-credentials? But I see micro-credentials as a symptom of some of the thinking around the changes that we need in the sector for the future of the sector and the future of universities. But it poses a lot of questions which are policy related. So for example, it poses a question about collaboration within universities, between countries. It poses questions about greater collaboration between employers, between industry bodies and universities and government funders. It poses questions for me about recognition. It poses questions about the value of what we teach and how that is recognized. And so there are framework questions here about what we aspire to in terms of making learning count, or having learning that counts, and agreeing on what national and international frameworks we work to, so that we can facilitate recognition of learning wherever it's taken place and whoever has awarded the credit for it. And it raises questions about how we persuade politicians that something different from their own experience might just be okay. So I don't know whether this is a peculiarly English problem, but there's a lot of resistance to developments in universities because it's not the same as they experienced when they went to university themselves. So there's some battles that are going on there about the very nature of who we are and what we do. There's questions about the funding. We just heard about individual learning accounts. In England, the lifelong learning entitlement is being considered and consulted on, with no real idea, I would dare to say, about how it might work, but with the very valuable intention of making sure that people can spend that at any times in their lives, rather than the 3 years when they leave school and get a degree that they then have to try and update themselves or even change subject for completely. So I see micro-credentials personally as playing a really important role in all of those questions and in that context, as I think being fundamental to lifelong learning. The questions that were coming up when I joined the chat earlier were about stackability. I think stackability is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And potentially, I think it's desirable. But again, it comes back to deciding whose learning counts and who puts the value on it, and what it brings to individuals. So those are my kind of scattered thoughts around micro-credentials within that university and higher education context, and and particularly around the policy context. And I'm afraid I don't have time to stay in the discussion, which I would really like to, because I think it's a fascinating thing to talk about. But I'm going to hand back to George.
Thanks, thanks so much, Liz. And we have collected all the questions that you brought forward now. These are all most relevant, and will certainly be addressed also in the coming year when it's explored by the stakeholders. Thanks so much for bringing these forward, Liz. And I have to go quickly to Carl, because I understand Carl needs to be at 3 o'clock also in another meeting. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, that's correct. Unfortunately, we had another meeting over planning this one. So I read the policy recommendations for the public employment services. As I mentioned in the previous meeting, not all public employment services in Europe are responsible for the real actions in career development. In a lot of countries, these are other institutions. So in the policy recommendations, there should be an opening to put that in, that we look for the other partners on the labor market cooperating with the public employment service, and that they are engaged in bringing the MOOCs to the people. I think that was the main thing I wanted to say about the policy recommendations, because in themselves, I think they are really good, but to be executable, there should be a contact with other institutions than only the public employment service.
Yeah, thanks for that remark, Carl. We will take that up also in the recommendations that came out of EMC-LM you referred to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks so much as a contribution of the employment agencies, and I certainly believe you will be part of the consultations in the coming years on the introduction of micro-credentials in the Flemish system.
Yeah. Okay. Because as I said, micro-credentials have a bigger chance to live in the labor market than the full programs, because that's what companies are mainly looking for really small pieces of education, really centered to the question they have, and their micro-credentials could be a solution.
Thanks, Carl. Then we go to Catherine Marginet from Fun France, the voice of a Mooc platform.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, everyone. This meeting has been very, very interesting from the very start. There are so many things that have been said that I don't exactly know what I can say that that would be completely new and different from what everyone has been saying. I'm talking about the early presentation of Matt, the question that Liz raised, and the different other topics that have been presented by MACA and, of course, by Con from the EU. So as an academic, I really believe that micro-credential is a great opportunity for universities to play a role in a big role in the continuous professional development market. It has been said, and it probably has been said much better than I can say it, that all over Europe, there is a huge gap between employees and the job that has to be filled. We have to upskill and reskill so many people, and this cannot be done by putting everyone back at a university to take a new degree. It has to be done by shorter programs, by more precise program, by more focusedly professionally oriented program, and micro-credential, in my opinion, is an important issue for that. And micro-credential are everywhere around the world. Look at the American platforms. They offer different kinds of micro-credential. George had an information on that on his initial presentation. Lots of private providers are creating online curricula with experts from different companies that are some sort of micro-credential, even though they are not micro-credential the way we have designed them in the common micro-credential framework, because we have been working with universities and partners, and we have decided to have a very strong definition of what we believe a micro-credential should be. And what I want to say is that the world is changing very fast. The crisis the COVID crisis has accelerated this big transformation. In France, but I believe it's the same in a lot of countries in Europe, universities have been doing continuous professional development trainings for years, most of them being face-to-face trainings. So if this crisis has really shown something to academic people, to the person in universities who are in charge of continuous professional development, is that we have to go digital for these questions. And micro-credential is raising a lot of interest from academic people because of this sort of conjunction between a crisis that shows that we cannot keep doing the way we have been doing for years, that other actors are moving very, very fast, raising a lot of money to go fast. And if university wants to play a role in this context, to be actors that are recognized by the competencies that they have, by what they can offer to the public, to the companies, to the learners, really very good contents that are professionally oriented, that will help learners to upskill or reskill their competencies, then it has to be done quickly, and micro-credentials are just at the right time to do that. And I really have the feeling that we have to move fast, because we are talking about activities that takes place in the digital world, and in the digital world, other actors will not wait for universities to be ready to discuss in details lots of things. And I think that in this world, when a place is taken, it's difficult for entities coming later to get a place. So if I have one final word, I think micro-credentials are strategic for universities, that we should be able to move fast to develop them, to play a role that is visible, and to show that universities really can offer contents and qualification that are relevant on the go fast and take risk. Are higher education institutions ready for that? Ask Manuela. I don't know. I'm afraid not. But I mean, probably we should help. When I'm talking now from my perspective, since I'm running the French Mooc platform for Mooc, we are working with universities to improve their knowledge of these questions, to improve their the fact that they have to understand all these issues, and to try to create the conditions to work together to go faster.
Thanks. And Catherine, what do you think is the the call now by the Commissioner, and hopefully the uptake then by the national governments? Are the national governments also ready for this? Do they see the urgency and the need on taking up the micro-credentials?
Well, I cannot talk from somewhere else, but from France. But as you know, George, and we have been discussing for a year now with the French Ministry of Education on these issues of micro-credential. They are absolutely aware of it. They will really put this question in the agenda since France will be a president. I mean, how do you say that, Koen? The French presidency of the EU, whatever.
Exactly, so French presidency.
Okay, so this is a topic on the specific field of higher education. Micro-credential is really a topic that France is going to push forward. And we are currently working with 20 universities in France, and we are working to answer an important call from the Ministry of Employment, which is absolutely dedicated to how to develop digital training, including micro-credential, but maybe going even further to provide full degrees online. So what we have been doing with the Open Mooc Consortium around micro-credential, from my perspective, in France, has really, put the idea in everybody's mind, and have really tried to to change. Are we going to be able to change fast enough? I don't know, but we, on our side, we try to do our best to help our university partners to move forward on that direction, and sharing good practices, even working together to co-create micro-credentials between universities, and of course with private partners or experts of a field, one field or another, are things that we really push forward to.
Thanks, and I hope that we, with the European Mooc Consortium, can, in parallel to that, already show the potential of micro-credentials and the ways forward, as we started already a bit earlier, and have already a structure in place via the Mooc platforms to provide these micro-credentials, as well as universities connected to EDU offering short learning programs under the CMF label. Yeah. So that would go, that could be a kind of explorative field for the national governments also to see how it works and how it could work in practice then. Thanks so much, Catherine. I would like to now give the floor to Lisbeth Hans, who is working for the Microball project, also very much focused on the micro-credentials in the Bologna process.
Well, that's indeed true. I was working on the Microball project, but I'm also a policy advisor for higher education from a ministry. So I'm also very keen to take your question of our ministries ready in a few minutes, if it's okay for you. But I will do a first reflection well, I'm actually going to, I compared the Microball recommendations with the recommendations you made in the project. And I see some common lines and some common challenges. And the first thing I want to say is something that Catherine also said, is that at this moment, we live in a challenging time in higher education, because the crisis actually did some things in higher education. It changed, it opened doors to digital education, but also, at least that's my impression, for the discussion on the role of universities and universities of applied sciences in the lifelong learning project and the possibilities they have in how to create or reorientate their offer also to lifelong learning, upskilling, reskilling of workforce. So I think that's a very interesting thing we have to talk about. But it also comes with some challenges. And the first challenge I would like to address is that we have to figure out what a micro-credential is. And we need a clear definition so that all of us are talking about exactly the same thing, because there's lots of diversity in what everyone considers as a micro-credential. And I know the Commission did a lot of effort in making a definition in their document, but I think they will agree that there's also been a lot of discussion on the definition only of the document. So I'm very keen to see how this discussion will end. But at Microball, we did a desk research, and we asked all participating countries and organizations to just list micro-credentials in their countries. And if you see that report, you will see the immense diversity of possible courses and possible initiatives that are getting the label of micro-credential. So I think that's a very big challenge that we have to address somehow. And another specific from the higher education sector, or from the view of higher education, is that we have to find a balance between known higher education processes and procedures, like the way we organize higher education for regular short cycle bachelor and master programs, and the needs of micro-credentials. So we have to find a balance between the need for more flexibility in micro-credentials and shorter notice and shorter reaction time, but not throwing away all the known procedures we have, because that will not be a working, it will not be able to work probably. And I think to work around things like legislation, quality assurance. For instance, one of the things we addressed in Microball is if you have a micro-credential, does it need the same quality assurance procedure as a bachelor program? Because of course we want to know that all our programs, also micro-credential programs, are of high quality. But does it need exactly the same procedure in order to be valued and be reviewed? There's also a lot of difference maybe in a thing we call standalone micro-credentials and micro-credentials that are part of higher education programs, because you can imagine that there are different things. You can have a part of a bachelor or a master program, which is a micro-credential on its own. And it can be very interesting for labor market to follow just a part of a bachelor or master program. But on the other hand, we can also imagine that sometimes we will need completely different programs which are not linked to regular bachelor and master programs. And then we have to figure out how to deal with those and how we link these two together. And other very interesting thing that I heard today was about the value of micro-credentials. And I think it's something that you started with, George, is that the value was defined by the quality, the recognition, and for me, the most important one, the relevance. Whatever we do has to be relevant for the learner in one way or another. They have to use it on a personal base or for personal development, or it has to be used in an employer-based situation. So we have to make sure that whatever we teach them or whatever they learn is something they can use afterwards and is valuable to them as a course. If I then look at my work as a policy advisor in higher education in Flanders, I can actually tell Koen that we use money of the Recovery and Resilience Facility we got to actually do a project on micro-credentials in higher education. So we actually created a fund, and all higher education institutions were able to well, ask money from the fund based on projects. And one of the possible topics was lifelong learning and micro-credentials. So we gave them the opportunity to develop new programs or to test new options in the lifelong learning micro-credential sector. But what we're also going to do is, in the meantime, sit together with all our higher education institutions and develop a common vision on micro-credentials and lifelong learning in higher education in the Flemish community. So I think that the combination of these two will make sure that we are ready in order to adopt a new policy on micro-credentials in the next years. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lisbeth, on both on your position as policy advisor and on the microball perspective. Koen, I have a question on the on how the Commission will I would say monitor or evaluate the developments in the different countries on their developments.
Yeah, that's a good question, of course. I mean, for this, there is reporting basically by the member states. So this does not yet exist, okay? So first of all, and also the proposal admits, I think, that there is a need for further research and further knowledge, building a further evidence base on micro-credentials. And for this, member states are invited in the recommendation. We will see whether they accept this as part of the negotiations. Because my experience is that when you have provisions on reporting, these are not always so much liked by member states. So here they will maybe try to say that they shouldn't report within 12 months or so. We will see. It will be interesting to see what is the end result compared to the proposal. But it would be member states to report on and to submit a plan also on what they have been doing. And then the monitoring of the Commission will come only after 5 years in terms of an evaluation. Now, in the meantime, you must also know that, and you know, that CEDEFOP is still carrying out their study on micro-credentials in the labor market, and this study is still going on. And I think it will be interesting also to do a monitoring of all the different projects financed with EU money through Erasmus Plus and other programs to see what activity is ongoing in terms of micro-credentials, as Lisbeth just referred to for Belgium. So this is, this is what at the moment is there. But okay, the Commission in addition has this task also to support further research. So there may be, but I don't know exactly what is in the pipeline, but there will be more data collection.
And I guess that also the European University Alliances can play a role in that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And they are also explicitly mentioned, of course, in the Council recommendation, not necessarily in relation to data collection, right? More in the implementation role. But I think, yeah, there will be important sources of information, because if you do data collection and you know that a certain group or has micro-credentials, yes, then I would think that it would be very logical to ask these, European alliances to do that, to deliver also data, which they have.
Yeah. And also within ED2, we will continue our work in a new project for the coming years in parallel to the developments of the national developments of micro-credentials. Anyone else wants to have bring forward a question or a statement? Some representatives here for companies, maybe. Questions to the panelists? Well, of course, a lot of information there, and still some openings and challenges that we have seen, and things that we have, so topics that we have discussed already within the consultation sessions of the European Commission and the Microball on what is actually meant with stackability, how to guarantee the quality, the recognition, and so on. Are outlined now in these recommendations, but of course these questions will come forward again at national level and discussed there in new platforms again. I don't know, is there also discussion between countries, or is every country now country will be working on themselves, or will there also be cross-country platforms to discuss the potential of micro-credentials? Do you know that? So I don't know if you, I would recommend that.
George, are you asking that to me, or?
No, I'm just wondering, or maybe
or to the panelists.
About this. Otherwise, you would get maybe dozens of different approaches in the plans after a year.
Yeah, the recommendation, I can say what the recommendation, the proposal for the recommendation says also, and I see there is a hand, but recommendation 20 says that member states and the Commission should jointly work on improving the scope and relevance of ongoing data collection on micro-credentials at union level.
Yeah.
So there is a call for a coordinated approach. And then on this, and I saw just a question in the chat from Patricia O'Sullivan, is data gathering, will you also consider micro-credentials learning from private higher education institutions? So the my answer to this would be yes, of course, that would also be covered, because the council recommendation does proposal for the council recommendation does not really distinguish between where micro-credentials come from. So it's acknowledges the existence of micro-credentials in different fields and at different levels, in the formal, the non-formal part. And of course, if you have such a scope of a council recommendation, you also need to do your data collection on the broad scope, which doesn't mean that you would do specific data collections in some areas, for example. It doesn't exclude this, sorry. It doesn't exclude specific data collection, for example, I don't know, around European universities, for example.
Thanks. Anka, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. As always, very interesting discussions. And I think, yes, we still have a bit in the journey, don't we? There's still so many unknowns and so many things that we're trying to put forward in all directions. I just wanted to, as maybe previously, make a mark and say that the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, ENQA, has also set up a working group to look at micro-credentials and the external quality assurance of micro-credentials. I'm pleased to say I am leading that group from the position of the British Accreditation Council. What is interesting is that I think in all of these discussions, we do come around to quality assurance, and then somehow we slide away from it, focusing on other things. And it will be interesting to see what conclusions this group comes to. There isn't anything that I could possibly share at this point in anticipation of what might be put forward. Our end results are scheduled for the end of next year. So there is, let's say, watch the space would be the message. But I think it is interesting, and I think we're hearing loud and clear that what we don't want to do is to take away from the flexibility, the maneuverability, and the response rate of micro-credentials in addressing employment needs at this point in time. But equally and obviously, we need to make sure that quality is at the level that we are crediting it to be. If this is part of a university structure or not, equally relevant is the fact that if credits are awarded, those credits do speak to quality in the way that we want to define it. So it is really quite important to strike this balance in the right way. And I guess why I wanted to come in now was because you had a question in terms of our nations somehow interacting, corresponding, discussing on this, and maybe not just yet formally as part of what Cohen was describing, but definitely in terms of quality assurance and quality assurance arrangements. We are having pan-European debates so that we can come forward at the European level with a position, and hopefully that position will then be debated, discussed, and moved towards the proposal, the kind of negotiation phase that Cohen was describing in terms of what member states might be able to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Anke, most relevant, and we'll also be close in touch with ENCRA on this, and really interesting too, because the topic of quality always comes back, and of course in relation also to the micro-credentials, and I guess Ebba wants to connect on that as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I was also thinking about what just has been said, so I will not repeat on that, but that is very important. But actually, I also wanted to stress about, I see the parallel with the work which UNESCO is doing about OER implementation, and that is to follow up what you were raising, George, about some kind of coordination, because they started very successfully this OER dynamic coalition to help member states for the implementation of OER, and it has just been running for 1 year, and it started in the middle of when the COVID was had its outbreak, and it has really had very good success. So maybe it can be good to see what they are doing, and if the Commission can do something in that way, so to say. Yeah, I also strongly believe in these coordinated actions. As you can imagine, that now in dozens of separate countries, they will discuss the same topics and yes, the same. And if you have reference groups, or there you can sometimes more easily solve issues, as some will be further in the discussion than others. And by sharing that, that will certainly be of help. Yeah. Lisbeth, you wanted to step in before, but I don't know, was that...
Well, I actually was going to support what you just said right now. I think that we can't forget that micro-credentials, well, they're very important, don't get me wrong, but that they're quite a recent term, and that it's quite a recent terminology in higher education that we work on. So we still need to do a lot of developmental work on legislation, on recognition, on quality, on all kinds of things, and we have to do it, and we have to do it faster than, well, we used to. That's what Catherine tried to say, I think. But in order that, we have to make sure that we have enough possibilities to learn from other countries, or to have negotiations, or to have conversations, sharing information, learning from each other, in order to make sure that we don't, by going faster, we don't divide between the countries right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisbeth. Koen.
Yeah, I think you just quick reaction on quality assurance, and maybe I didn't stress it enough in my presentation, but of course, quality assurance is omnipresent in the proposal for the Council recommendation. it's included as an important element in the definition of micro credentials that is proposed by the Commission, that will need to be discussed by the member states. It's indeed very important to have a definition. At the same time, okay, it is not so easy to come to a definition. But what is important, I think, in the definition that is proposed here by the Commission in relation to quality assessment is that it refers to the underpinning by quality assurance following agreed standards in the relevant sector or area of activity. So this refers to the fact that, of course, the quality assurance will be different depending on where you are. But I think it will be an interesting topic of data collection to see in particular what kind of quality assurance will be of use. Because, okay, in the higher education field, it would be quite obvious to be inspired by ESG or to follow 100% ESG. But of course, the question is, okay, too much of a system to do for a small volume of learning. So the proportionality probably needs to be addressed there. And then for micro-credentials outside the field of formal higher education, okay, then the question is, of course, interesting as well. What will happen? Will member states set up systems? Will these micro-credentials, will they adhere to maybe other international standards like ISO standards, for example? What role will this VET tool on quality assurance play? So I think that is an interesting domain of research. I also saw a couple of comments in the chat. I must say, Simone, you have been very active. Thanks for that. The Council recommendation, of course, sees micro-credentials as a flexible tool, to achieve objectives in relation to learning, in relation to the labor market. It also refers to qualification frameworks as an option when relevant. And this has two things. On the one hand, you want, of course, to keep the flexibility of the offer and so on. And this should be reconciled. But on the other hand, when you have a link to a qualification framework, the big advantage of that is transparency and also some trust and quality criteria that are applied in that context. And this can also support, for example, the validation of learning outcomes when somebody has a micro-credential and wants to go to another area of study, that the learning outcomes of this credential will be recognized, even if it's not directly, let's say, in the domain, and of course, where relevant. But I believe it can also support their validation. I mean, this is what I wanted to share.
Thanks so much. And then I think also within the European setting by the EU, the setting of communities on certain topics can be powerful. And I believe that there will be also on the subtopics of micro-credentials, we could have some communities with some experts or countries that are further on these topics. Could be very helpful, and one dedicated maybe to quality then. Anke.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to pick up on two things. One that Lisbeth said and Koan. Indeed, so what we've done now already in this working group is we've mapped the situation across the partners that are in the group. And what we're noticing is exactly, just wanted to confirm that Lisbeth is absolutely on track with this. The word micro-credential, the term as such, and the way it is defined, used, or the way that it can capture realities which are on the ground is yet emerging. So basically, there are multiple situations across Europe where what we would refer to as micro-credential is happening, but the actual terminology behind it is not a descriptive of micro-credentials. And this is becoming increasingly important that we change our message to say, and we have done that in the working group, to say it doesn't matter whether you call them micro-credentials or not. if they follow these particular broad descriptors, it means that they do fall under this umbrella, and we need to have the conversation with you. So this is point one. And the second thing I wanted to mention, also from the work that we've conducted so far, and I agree with Cohen, it's very easy to say ESG is an umbrella, and yes, everything can kind of work under ESGs. It's a simple statement that we've always tried to make. But the reality behind it is that it's not just higher education which will be looking at micro-credentials. As we've seen today, the variety is immense. And what that means is that for higher education, the prime element of focus is really the articulation with higher education, or the contribution of higher education, like Catherine was saying, the print that we want to make within higher education for that particular area of development. What this really means, I think in our view, is that we have to find those niche areas of quality assurance which we cannot avoid. So what becomes imperative for micro-credentials in the way that we want to design quality assurance, and how do we then go about doing this? Because it's equally easy to say that we will fully rely on internal QA structures in an institution to pick up micro-credentials and bundle them into their own system. Fair play. But where exactly is that? Where is the confirmation of that happening? And should that be happening, I think Lisbeth was saying, should it be comparable to a bachelor, or should it have some deviation, some specificity? And this is really what we are exploring, whether external quality assurance or internal quality assurance needs a level of specificity. And if it does, what exactly is that, so that we can contribute to the debate around micro-credentials, so that we can foster this development rather than impede it and kind of stop it in its tracks. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm afraid we have to come to an end of this session, and we can only conclude that there is really, we made a good start with MOOC's micro-credentials, supporting the continuing education market, and we made a start of introducing it in the educational system. And with the support of all the stakeholders that were represented today, we have a lot of work ahead of us in the coming years. And the collaboration that we did with the stakeholders within this project, EMC-LM, certainly helped us, and also working in an international setting certainly helped us forward. And yeah, we are all part of this shared challenge and responsibility to work in this the coming years. Thanks so much for all the speakers and the panelists today. And I also want to thank all the project partners in EMC-LM for the work done in the past 3 years. And we have done a lot, but also the feeling that we have just started, and we will continue with the same energy for the coming years in the same setting. Thanks so much to all of you, and have a good afternoon and evening. Thanks.
Thank you, George. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.